Hello and welcome to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. My name is Mehmet, and in each episode, I talk about different topics from technology trends, entrepreneurship, startups, and different topics. And sometimes I have with me guests who are thought leaders in their industry. And today, for the first time, I'm very happy to have someone from the academia part. I have with me today Kim and Todd. Please, Kim and Todd, can you introduce yourself and what you do, what you are up to, and then we will take the discussion from there.
Sure, thanks. Go ahead.
Absolutely. So we are business school professors at the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University. And we have been working with and studying startups for the last 25 years. We're actually in the middle of a research project right now looking at hype in startup investing and how there might be waves where certain industries are hot and what the implications are for that. I'm a marketing professor. Todd is a management professor. He teaches strategy and entrepreneurship. We also are pretty well versed in startups. We have co-founded a couple of tech startups in the healthcare informatics space. We are angel investors in more than a dozen startups, some which have been awesome and some which have been not so great.
That's great.
And we teach the concepts to our students and to other folks in the entrepreneurial ecosystem.
That's very great to have the people who usually they teach this stuff. I'm very happy to have you both with me today. Um, First, like maybe it's a traditional question, but because you've been in the academia and also you did it by yourself, and I'm sure like you have advised and invested in multiple startups across different industries. Um, I want because this is something that also attracted me. The concept of the iceberg, right, and the startups who face the iceberg. Can you explain this and how you know these startups they overcome the iceberg?
Yeah, absolutely. So it may help to have a little bit of our origin story. So
Sure.
Titanic Effect, which connects to the iceberg and is visually represented there, is a book that Kim and I wrote with a co-author who is a tech serial entrepreneur. And we went to a lot of talks in the venture community here where he would present about technical debt and how to address technical debt. And it's all about kind of the uncertain or the unknown, right? You make investments in your tech stack, not knowing really where the firm might pivot or what the customers might find appealing. So you have to do that in a way that is intentional to allow you to adapt. And what Kim and I observed, Kim from the marketing perspective and looking at customers and competition, myself from the strategy and entrepreneurship side, thinking about mistakes that firms make in other arenas around the team, how you allocate equity, things like that. And we kind of approached our co-author Michael Cloran and said, hey, it's more than just technical debt, right? There are all these buckets of hidden debts, if you will. And the visual that came to mind was these decisions that where you only see above the surface, but a lot of it is really below the surface in terms of things you need to be aware of. It's hard for us to think about, at least here, icebergs without thinking about the Titanic. When you think about icebergs and calamitous situations, which led to my coming up with the title of a presentation we did now almost 10 years ago. And I was like, I know, we should call it the Titanic Effect. And I'll let Kim take it from here for the next part of the story.
I said, you just can't make something up about the Titanic. We have to go do some research and see if there's anything going on. And what we discovered is that, yes, the iceberg was the precipitating incident, but the reason that the Titanic sunk wasn't just the iceberg. It was choices about how they designed a two-story dining room, lowering the bulkheads, the rivets that were used, the fact that they tried to meet the needs of 3 different target segments in one boat. The fact that because it was such an engineering marvel, it was a new steam engine. It was a big ship. And there were a lot of new things going on that they didn't have very many able-bodied seamen. And so we thought this is very parallel for startups. A lot of people think there's one thing a startup does that kills them. It isn't. It's one thing that is interlinked with 6 to 10 other things, that the combination is what kills them, not the one thing.
Okay. And I think, yourself being with the background of marketing, I am sure that part of that, is maybe people focus too much on the technical side, right? And they forget, the other aspects. So we will talk in a moment about that. But, like in general, of course, after this experience that you both have, there must be some common mistakes that you see in the early stage startups, right? And what are these common mistakes that you always see,
Yeah.
specifically, if you can highlight that, and usually how they can avoid? Of course, there's no spell for everything, right? So, but of course, there's some kind of a guide or, like must have. So, what you can share with us on this?
Sure.
Well, first of all, we found 32 mistakes that are commonly made that are in the
Wow.
book. And we tell people how you can avoid them. Not everybody makes all 32, but it's pretty good background. And we share by stage of the startup how that will work. But we do have a couple of favorites that we talk about a lot. You want to start?
Yeah, sure. So in the beginning, and I know your audience is a combination of people who may be CTOs for scalable tech companies, but also solopreneurs or people who are kind of part-time CTOs for a number of firms. So I know you have some diversity in your group, but hopefully these ideas are helpful to all of your audience, because they're going to be working with tech companies that think of themselves as tech companies, not as ventures that have multiple dimensions. And one of the earliest ones that we often see, you envision the 2 or 3 founders kind of sitting around the table having a beer or whatever, and talking about their startup idea, and they split the equity. We call it the curse of thirdsies. And then 6 months later, only one person is really kind of driving the bus, so to speak. It's really hard to anticipate at the origin of a venture who's actually going to pull the venture along and do most of the heavy lifting. So we call it the Detberg of inequitable equity, that you allocate equity too early without really having a sense of who's contributing. So how do you avoid that, or at least to some degree address that problem? You make sure you're vesting the equity over time, that you have to earn that equity over a 3 to 5 year period as the venture launches and starts to grow. So what we try to do is not just identify the Detberg, but also what might be some of the solutions to at least avoid sinking, right? Even if you hit the Detberg. Yeah.
So 2 big ones that we see in the marketing area is, first of all, people love to be disruptive. Oh, what we're going to do is so unique. Nobody's ever done it. We're in a category all by ourselves. That's a terrible place to be, because nobody knows how to evaluate it. Your customers need to understand what you're going to do. So what you really want to do is be in something that's well known and differentiate yourself from everybody else. And that differentiation can't just end in ER, like better, faster, whatever. It's got to be something quantifiable. It's 20% better. It reduces costs by 30%. It reduces headaches by 50%. We need not just ER, but something really tangibly better. And so that usually requires a good deal of customer discovery. People like to keep doing the same things that they're doing. And so the mistake I call it is the customer value void, which is you don't really know what customers need and want. The technical solutions are usually an innovator came up with something, and maybe it is amazing, but you really have to do the hard work, the uncomfortable work, the makes us feel very awkward work of going out and finding out, what are people doing? What are their pain points? What would they pay for? How much better does it have to be to pay that? There's a lot of disconnects we see where a new technical solution is only available at X price, but customers don't want to pay for that problem with that price. They want to pay less. So doing that kind of early work, talking to people, not trying to sell them, but to understand what they need is really, really critical.
This resonated a lot because I used to be in my last job, a account executive for a tech company. And, like the last 10 years, I was in the consulting, pre-sales consulting, technical consulting. And this is, something I see it in common. Sometimes you see in the market new joiners that they think, they are disrupting an industry, but they end up by no one want to buy it, right? Just because now this, just out of mind, I would say question, how important is the timing in the success of these startups?
Yeah, that's a tough one. There definitely are times where you can be too early, and then there are times when you can be too late, and really trying to understand where you fit. I can see many, if you look through startup yards, there are some great ideas in there. They were just too early. The market wasn't ready for them. So, part of how you can assess this is product market fit. So if you're too early in the market, when you're talking, people are not really nodding their heads. They're not raising their hands. The marketing is tough. The sales is tough. The sales team feels kind of beat upon. When you are in the right timing and you've got the right message and the right value proposition, marketing gets a lot easier. You cast things out there and a bunch of people raise their hands and the conversations get easier and easier. And so that's kind of when, and it's tough as a business. We watched a tech startup that was on the early side. And while we were working with them over a 2-year period, it moved into the majority and they got bought. I mean, so the timing can be really important.
Yeah. Now, you talked a little bit about the technical debt, right? So just for the sake of, audiences who are interested to understand more about, this technical debt, what could be the cause of having a technical debt, how it can be approached, and how to come out of the technical debt?
Sure. So one of the Icebergs that we talk about is kind of the overdue and overspend. And that's where, before you've really done the customer discovery that Kim was talking about, you invest tens, even hundreds of thousands of dollars to build a platform. And then you go out and find that your customers aren't using it in the way you thought at all. So that debt is you've invested in something without understanding the problem that you're actually solving and how customers are going to use it. But then you're stuck with this core platform technology that you don't want to scrap the whole thing, right? You want to be able to kind of redesign, but that's hard. And as a CTO and someone in the space, you know way better than we do how hard and perhaps expensive that can be. So again, it's making those decisions under uncertainty in what you build and how you build it on the technology side. And then as the firm changes direction, you're stuck with those decisions. And that can include hiring decisions as well, right? Technical debt isn't just the tech stack itself. You think that what you need is a programmer who can do a certain kind of software, and that's what you hire. And then it turns out that actually, as the platform evolves, you need somebody who's much better at user interface, for example. And the person you hired really isn't that great. So we see this both in marketing technology, but also in software development, that there's increasing kind of specialization of a lot of different roles. And it's really hard to get that one person who can wear all those hats and do it well.
And we get it. It's easier. It's easier to sit and program and build tech than go out and talk to people and find out what they need.
For some people.
So that's kind of why that happens. We've also seen the opposite version, which is people hear minimally viable product and they just minimal. They forget the viable part. The best way to do a minimally viable product is to think about where do you want to end up and work backwards to what is the least amount of tech I have to do now. And what sometimes people do is they say, what's the least I have to do now? Not really thinking about where it's headed. And then you can't bolt things onto it. So really thinking forward about what you ultimately want to deliver because you know what customers value, and then breaking it down to what is the least I have to do to start is really important.
That brings me to a very exciting discussion that I like myself about MVPs, because I'm trying to figure out my way also with the startup world, because I have ideas, I know the concepts, but the world viable, because you mentioned the world viable. Like, of course, there's some stages where founders, they need to talk to a lot of people, they need to do a lot of research, but do they need, to have the full vision from day one, or is this something that can change over time? Like, of course, the founders, maybe one or more, they will have a, idea or multiple ideas. They come up with the product, but do they need really to have, this 5, 10 years vision from day one, or is this something that can evolve with time?
I would say you should have kind of, I would call it plan A, right? How you think or envision the platform unfolding over time, and the big problem, the big dent you're going to make in the universe. And if you're thinking about that, that's going to make you a better listener as you see where the startup kind of starts to deviate from that. And be able. Now, does that mean you have to have the 5 to 10 year grand vision? Absolutely not. And especially, yeah, as Kim says, that roadmap, we actually don't like the metaphor of a roadmap at all for strategy, especially for a startup, because there's simply too many uncertainties. And you have to be able to navigate by making changes as you go. At the same time, so we like the metaphor of sailing instructions better, which kind of accounts for the more iterative nature and the fact that the crew is always involved in monitoring for storms, changes in wind and currents, etc. But the crew doesn't get inspired by saying, hey, we're going to get on a boat and just go figure it out. They get inspired by saying, here's the paradise island that we're trying to get to. And once we do that, that's our cause, right? That's the why. And I think it's important to have some of that vision early to be able to communicate the why, and that generates enthusiasm, not just from your own employees, but from investors, from customers and others.
Yeah, if you just only think about the next year, you could be making mistakes that would cause you to throw everything away. So you need a longer time horizon than a year. I don't know if it has to be 10 years, but some notion of where you think you want to end up. And that could be adjusted as you go, but a fairly robust idea of what all skills. I was just talking to a tech entrepreneur yesterday, and they were like, oh, we're going to start with this AI programmer who's going to build our backend. And I'm like, all right, but do you need an AI programmer to start? Like that's expensive. So how could you create this so that the AI can plug and play, and maybe you don't have it at the launch, but then once you have some data, then you have AI that can come in and work with it. I mean, this gets back to what do customers really want?
Yeah. Now, sometimes, and this is also out of things that I followed and seen different tech companies. So sometimes you have what we call the product market fit, but the business model is not like so good, right? So how it's important, for having alternative for the business model in order really for the startup to, to reach to the next phase.
Yeah, we suggest that you consider everything in the first phases as a hypothesis. The target customer is a hypothesis. The value proposition is a hypothesis. How we're going to make money is also a hypothesis. And you need to have alternative hypotheses in all those dimensions. We sometimes run a workshop on business models. I mean, people don't seem to realize there's like 20 or 30 different business models. And so we like to have people brainstorm. I could generate revenue this way or that way or this third way, because you are going to have to flex. You don't really know what people are going to be willing to pay. You don't know if they want to pay up front or they want to pay along the way. You don't know if they want a transaction or a subscription. You have to kind of sort through all of those details as you are interacting with them.
This is particularly true. We do a lot of work in healthcare with life science startups and other innovative efforts in that space. Mm-hmm. And it's very hard in healthcare where the primary beneficiary, the person who makes the choice, in many cases, the care provider or the clinician, and the person who pays, in the insurer as the payer, are very different entities and have very different motives, right? So understanding not just what's the problem we're helping solve and for whom, but who pays for it and will they pay, as Kim suggested, how much of an improvement do you need for people to actually get out their checkbook and write that check? And that, like product market fit, is something that you can test empirically. We do know and see startups that have a really nice solution to a problem that's very compelling, and they're serving an underserved market that simply can't afford to pay for that solution. So then you have to look for other models as ways to fund a venture like that.
Great idea, because this was my next question. Funding is the biggest, I would say, top of mind for any founder. I have my own view on this, although, I'm bootstrapping, I can say, my own business and the way I'm doing this. But I can understand also at some stage, there's need for money, right? You need to get things up. So what do you think is, the point where really, the founders would say, okay, guys, it's time to go to an angel investor. It's time to go for a bigger round, maybe. So what are, the characteristics, or I would say the guides that will tell the founders, okay, now it's the time?
Well, I think a question that precedes that should be, well, first of all, we believe in the right funding model for the venture, and there isn't one right model. But we see at least too many, particularly tech entrepreneurs, who feel like to be successful, they've got to go out and raise a bunch of money and get to venture capital, and that's what a successful entrepreneur kind of looks like. And we don't believe that. We think being a solopreneur, having a side gig, or just being self-employed can be very rewarding. And we would discourage people from falling into the trap of saying, at some point I've got to raise a lot of money to be a successful entrepreneur, because there are other models. There are models where instead of raising money from investors, you simply sell customers, right? And especially in a service model, that might be a better way to go. Getting involved in the fundraising piece is very demanding, both in terms of time and energy on the founder or the founding team. So you want to make sure that you're committed to the obligations or hidden debts that go along with that, because once you take those investor dollars, you are now locked into a cycle of how much growth they're expecting to be able to get to the next round. So I would start with that.
Yeah, I think it's hard because there are a couple of things that might drive you towards getting funding. For example, sometimes to develop the product is expensive. If you're thinking about launching a medical device or a drug, you're talking about tens, hundreds of millions of dollars. Most of us can't get that out of our pocket or from our friends and family. And also, if you want to do a direct to consumer model with the tech, it's hard to get all the money you need from customers directly to advertise effectively. So when a lack of money is going to prevent you from making product inroads, or a lack of money is going to prevent you from creating awareness with customers and connecting with customers, then it is in the best interest of the organization for you to go out and find some money. But as a CEO, that's a full-time job. So if that's what you're doing, then you have to make sure you know what the rest of the organization is doing to meet those needs. It takes like a full year of working with the marketplace, doing a lot of talks, going to places, entering competitions, maybe being an accelerator. It takes a lot to get to the place of having the kind of money that you want. It's not just like, I'll do 2 presentations and $1 million are going to drop into my lap. That does not happen.
Yeah, of course, that's not possible. I want to go back to the, previous to funding part about, starting the business itself and how to grow it. And one of the things, and one of the books that I read many times, actually, there are 2 theories, right? So you have the lean approach, and then you have the 0 to 1 approach, right? I want to hear your opinion about what fit who, and is it like one thing for everyone, or how do you see, between these 2 schools, I would say?
Well, I would start by saying one of the reasons we wrote the Titanic Effect and take the approach we do is that when really either of those, but particularly the lean startup is used in excess. It can actually lead to what we call the pinball entrepreneur. They're constantly pivoting and bouncing around without any kind of sense or conviction about where they're heading. So this idea of the pivot was one of the core things that led us to say, yeah, you do need to be prepared to pivot, but every time you pivot, you are creating additional hidden debt with your customers, right? You pivot in a new direction, all of a sudden your product has different features or different benefits. You have to go back and essentially re-educate your existing customers, as well as come up with a new brand and approach to market. Similarly, because of technical debt, every time you pivot, you could be stuck with outdated technology that no longer kind of serves as a good base for growth. So I think it's much more of a contingent model, kind of the it depends, than there's one way that every startup needs to approach the market and grow. And it's really about trade-offs, right? Which every model has some trade-offs associated with it, and understanding those is what we would suggest is most important.
I think it also depends on what the startup is doing. You know, I think the lean startup works really well when you have incremental improvements, right? So it's not a 2x, a 3x, it's a 50% better, right? So then I don't need to invest huge amounts. I can ride on what has already been done and just demonstrate how I'm better. When you have something that really offers a truly unique improvement, that's where the 0 to 100 model really comes in. And it kind of demands that. Not all startups are going to have that 10x improvement. If you have a 10x improvement, really, you should go hard, right?
Yes.
The universe needs you.
Right.
That's not to say incremental is bad. I mean, all improvements are good, right? It's just that what it takes when you only have an incremental improvement is very different from when you have something revolutionary and new. I mean, think about Airbnb, I think is a great example. You know, people were renting houses from property managers and, VRBO and some other folks before Airbnb came into play. But to actually think about, I could market my room, my bed, my, garage, right? That was a huge new rethinking of travel that's had pretty broad ramifications. So they did need to go hard, and they did. And now they've actually caused VRBO to create a verb. I'll verbo it.
Yeah.
Which they never would have done if people haven't said, I'm going to Airbnb it,
I have to agree with you on this, because I talk a lot with a lot of, here let's say hot startup scene in Dubai. And I see these guys that come with the ideas, and yeah, I tell them, guys, there's nothing wrong of starting something small, like as you said, the 2x, 3x, and then you're gonna go to the 10x, 100x if you want. And this is what I'm doing currently. I'm trying to see where I can do, because I know with the power and the resources that I have, I'm not in position to have this 10x, maybe one day. But for now, there's nothing wrong, because anytime you can exit the business and then you go to your next venture, right? So there's nothing wrong. I have two questions left. One is, how important to have mentors and surround yourself with people that always, do like, hey, wake up, you're going to the wrong direction.
Extremely.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is, one of the things that you don't see in the background is that many of those people who have those 10x, those 100x ideas, this is not their first rodeo, so to speak.
Yes.
That's an American idiom, but they have actually tried and failed, or tried and been small. And it was the series of small things that led them to the brilliant idea of that 10x thing. So even don't think it has to happen this first time. If you even look at like books, most people do not have bestsellers on their first book. You have to learn. And that's where the mentoring comes in. And we actually published a paper last year that suggests that the best people that you want to get mentored from are people who are already entrepreneurs and who invest in startups, because they have the skills of both the investor and the entrepreneur. And so they're going to give you the best, most robust coaching that will help you. So it's okay. Ask people, you did this before. Can you help me envision how to do this? Most successful entrepreneurs are happy to help businesses that they can get behind.
But you also, it is an investment. It's as much of an investment as building the product or doing customer discovery. We think of it as kind of advisor discovery, right? Or mentor discovery. It might take 40 or 50 coffees, lunches, etc. You're going to have so much caffeine by the time you get through this. It's going to be amazing. But you need to find the right ones, right? You'll have a lot of people who tell you what you should do. But it will be a select few that actually listen to you, that have good ideas, and that are kind of in sync with your vision of where you want to go and what you want to accomplish. So those 40 or 50 meetings might result in a small group of 3 to 5 that are really your go-to advisors. They actually respond to your texts or your emails or WhatsApp or whatever you're using. And they also are coaching you in a way that you can move to that next inflection point. So in short, it's extremely important. You raise something that I think is really critical, and at least some tech entrepreneurs have a tendency to be a little more introverted, a little more kind of shut myself in my garage or my dorm room or whatever, and just hammer through this problem. And getting that advice can really help you accelerate your development as a venture, and get to that next point. We have, Kim mentioned one of the papers, but upstream on what we call venture advocate behaviors. And they're the things that your community can do to help you move forward that don't involve actually writing a check. And a lot of the things that happen early in the entrepreneurial journey for founders are the things that set them up for success to raise money to sell a product. And that's about getting the right advisors or mentors, getting their feedback so that you can be smarter and more efficient in how you move forward.
2 words of advice about this. First of all, mentors should not be paid. So anybody who says, oh, I'll mentor you if you pay me, give me a %, that should be a red flag. Now, I'm not saying that if someone offered a lot of help over time that you don't decide to give them some equity, but that should be your choice because of the value that they created. And we have a couple of ventures where we have been given equity simply from advising and bringing ideas to them over time. And finally, they're like, oh my gosh, we've been making money on your ideas, so we want to reward you. That's the way that payment should be able to happen. And the second thing is, don't forget to tell the mentors what you did with their advice. You can't believe how many people we give advice to and they go away and we have no idea. And so you remember the ones who come back to you and say, you know, you told me to do this, I did it, and here's what happened. Whether it's good or bad, just because they had bad advice or it didn't work this time doesn't mean that they don't want to know that, right? They want to be good mentors too. So keeping the dialogue flowing, don't just go away and do your own thing and never let anyone know what they did that was useful.
Yeah. Final question to you both. Where do you see the startup scene going to? Because recently, a lot of people going with the solopreneurship approach, one-man business approach. So how do you see things going on? Of course, we gotta still see normal startups, but I want to understand from your point of view, especially you do a lot of research, you talk to a lot of people, where you are seeing things heading.
I'll take a first shot at that. I think the nature of work is changing fundamentally, and COVID was a big accelerator of that in terms of working remotely, people increasing their side gigs, and I see work evolving as more of a portfolio, that people will have a portfolio of revenue streams, so to speak. Some of those will be entrepreneurial, some of those will be side gigs, and some might be your main gig that you do 2 or 3 days a week. And I think employers need to be kind of sensitive to that change and enabling it. So that's a first shot.
Yeah, I think that, as he said, the portfolio. I was talking to someone just yesterday who, was a solopreneur, and then her husband was a solopreneur, and then they combined their efforts and they created a company that was a lifestyle business. And by doing that lifestyle business, they got the vision for a scalable tech company. And so I think you're going to see that evolution, and people over their life spans are going to also have times where they need and want the stability of an employer with a side gig for, fun, or they're going to go out on their own. and then, you know, maybe that gets bought, so they're back to an employer. You're just going to see these waves of, it's not going to be one thing over your lifetime. It's not going to be one thing for everybody. It's going to be a mixed bag for people.
That's great insights from you both. Thank you very much for the time today on the show. And of course, I would be sharing a link to your both websites if anyone is interested to get like more advice from you.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here. And as usual, this is for my audience. If you have any feedback, any comments about this episode or on the show in general, you can reach out to me either by email, LinkedIn, or Twitter. If you are watching this on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you are listening on your favorite podcast platform, also don't forget to subscribe. Thank you very much, and until we meet next episode.
Thank you so much.